here. All right. We're live now. All right. Back on Zoom here. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug, as always. And I'm with my brothers and sisters today here at the Awakened by Yahuwah Fellowship. We are going to be getting into our Sabbath day chapter by chapter readings that we've been doing. So we're getting closer and closer to the end of Deuteronomy, the end of the first 4.5 books of Masha here. We're getting closer and closer to the curses and all that. So now we're going to be doing 23 to 26 today. I'll be starting us off at 23. Let's see here. I'll be using my net New English translation of the Septuagint, which I have here for simplicity reasons. It's very modern English here, so let me just get a highlighter here. My purple one died. Oh, let's see here. Here we go. All right. Let's see here. Try to make some notes if anything stands out. Okay. Here. All right, Deuteronomy 23 from the LXX. A castrated male and one made a eunuch shall not enter the assembly of Yahuwah. Now, as far as context, I think it would have to be someone that castrated themselves. And I could see this as male prostitution in a temple, maybe a former pagan that castrated himself. I doubt it's talking about someone that went to war and that happened, that it was against their will. I think this has to be someone that intentionally castrated themselves. Well, yeah, Mom. That even the transgender goes back to male prostitution. If you understand where that concept comes from, supposedly Semiramis was the deity of transitions. Okay, so like Jonathan Kahn brought up recently from his research is that even with what we call trans people today, that is not a new thing. That was in cult prostitution. That was in, the male prostitutes, the male priests of Semiramis would be castrated. Okay, most likely that's what this is talking about. It's about someone that would have castrated themselves willingly cannot enter Yahuwah's assembly. One from a prostitute shall not enter the assembly of Yahuwah. I find it interesting. The very next verse says, one from a prostitute shall not enter the assembly of Yahuwah. No Ammonite or Moabite shall enter into the assembly of Yahuwah, even to the 10th generation. Now that's key. It says, even to the 10th generation. There is a cutoff point. So this is important to pay attention to. The last phrase is even to the 10th generation. Now, I find it interesting, the Septuagint does not say, okay, so I think this is where people get confused. It says, he shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah even forever. Important note to take here, when you're looking at the Greek and Hebrew language, even though in English it says forever, in the Greek and Hebrew, sometimes that word doesn't always mean forever. I'll give you an example. In Revelations, right, it says, forever and ever, their torment goes forever. Okay, first of all, it says the smoke of their torment goes up forever, number one. Number two, that word forever in the Greek New Testament is the same Greek word here, eon. Eon, not saying always that it can't be eternity. The majority of the time, aeon or eon does not mean eternity. It's an age. You can look that up for yourselves. In the Thayer's lexicon and Strong's concordance, it can mean an age or even a messianic age. So doesn't necessarily have to mean forever. If it's forever, then Ruth is screwed, by the way.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So it's important to understand the context of this verse. It's talking about to a certain generation. And then it says even for an age, it would be better translated if you want my opinion on it. It should say even for an age, because eon doesn't always mean forever. And even in the Hebrew, olam, the Hebrew word olam there does not always mean forever, FYI. So just keep that in context there. It's not saying forever and ever a Moabite or Ammonite can never come in. So that would make no sense at all. And I understand that, Ruth became part of the Commonwealth, but Ruth was an ethnic Moabite. So go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
So a couple questions with that. Let me ask my first question, then I want to go back to the word for prostitute or harlot. So with the Ammonite and Moabite shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah, even until the 10th generation. He shall not enter into. Okay, never mind. I have the answer. I was because I was looking at this the other day, and I was because it says even unto the 10th generation, there's a certain period, and I was making the mistake of counting Boaz's lineage, and I was like, but he's only the 7th generation down from when this was given, instead of, it doesn't give Ruth's lineage. If she came in, then she was most likely like an 11th generation Moabite. But my other question would be, you answered that one the other day. I forgot. The question, the word, because the Masoretic would definitely read differently. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation. However, the word in the Greek, which I would definitely trust more, is porne, which is a woman who sells her body for sexual uses, a prostitute, a harlot. Yeah. However, it also does seem to give the definition any woman indulging in unlawful sexual intercourse, whether for gain or for lust. However, I'm not so sure about that, because would a harlot be someone who is just having sex outside of marriage? Would the word being porne, like, or porn, because people of the world have unlawful sexual intercourse without being married, but there's definitely a difference between that and someone who indulges in porn and sells her body.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There has to be a distinction.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add to your point. There has to be a distinction. I would trust with the Septuagint more and say that from what it seems like, I don't think bastard is wrong. I think where the King James was going was that it's the commandment is talking about a child from a prostitute. So technically an unlawful child.
So could that be, does that necessarily, because the word for porne, it seems to, it doesn't only seem to be like prostitute, it also seems to say that it can mean just someone that indulges in sexual intercourse for lust, which is definitely not selling your body. So I'm just wondering if, and maybe we don't know, but I'm wondering if it can just be someone sleeping around or if it has to be a prostitute.
Yeah, I think I would have to look into the Greek New Testament and the language and see if they ever use a different word for whoredom. From what I've seen is that what's confusing, and usually the Greek language doesn't do this, they use pornea for both prostitution and whoredom. So I think that's where the confusion comes. And so, yeah, it could be possible. It could be general whoredom. I would think it's specifically, though, the context of it following the first verse, I would think it talking about a child of prostitution. I more with child of an actual prostitute. Only because it has to do with pagan worship. See, what we don't understand back then is you had cult prostitutes, you had you prostitution was not just selling your body for money. It had to do also with like worship of other gods. So that's what we got to understand too. Like even with the Baal Peor thing, there was sex rituals with the Baal Peor thing. Baal Peor was called the god of openings or gates. So like basically what Israel did with the Midianite women with Baal Peor, that was a sex ritual. So that's what we need to understand is they weren't just committing whoredom, they were committing whoredom with Baal worship. So that's what these prostitutes do. They don't just sell their body. They in the ancient times, they would sell their body and would do weird rituals. So a child that's born of a prostitute is a child born out of prostitution that has to do with worship of other mighty ones. To me, that makes sense why Yahuwah says a child that comes from that can't enter the assembly. Why? Because he's entering, it's a child born from pagan worship in essence. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Prostitution today doesn't do with that, but if you research for yourself, it's directly connected to Baal. A lot of prostitution in those times was connected to worship of pagan mighty ones. It was, you can't separate it back then. Mm-hmm. That's what Baal Peor was about. That's what all of those. If you really research into the ancient times, what was prostitution connected to? It was a lot of the times connected to that. And like I said, even the castrating could be connected to Semiramis worship, technically. So that's something to look up. Like if don't take my word for it, you can look it up for yourself. Other people like Jonathan Kahn have even researched and found that out. That how people want to become trans and men becoming women and women becoming men. That was a custom of Semiramis worship, and it had to do with her transitioning her male priests into women. So that's just something I learned recently. So I think there's definitely a context. I believe verse 1 and 2 are related to one another to understand the context. And again, it could just be talking about a male child or female child born from a regular prostitute that prostitutes herself. Either way, I don't think it could be understood as just regular whoredom. Because then what happens with the grafted in concept when you got Gentiles that could have been born out of wedlock, in general wedlock, that are coming into the walk. Mm-hmm. So, I think it has to be more specific than just whoredom. In general, it has to be talking about a child of a prostitute. Because we see other things, right? It says you cannot bring a hire of a prostitute or a dog into the temple. You can't bring money from prostitution. Mm-hmm. So we see other restrictions about prostitutes, even in his Torah, that you can't, let's say, someone gets somehow a prostitute owes him money, and you get money from, let's say a prostitute borrows money from you and you get money back from them. You can't use that money to bring it as an offering in the temple. Mm-hmm. That's what Yahuwah is saying. He's saying a hire of a dog or a prostitute you don't bring into his set apart place. So there's something about a prostitute that is extremely unclean that Yahuwah does not. He doesn't want anything that's come from a prostitute in his assembly. I think that's the best way I could explain it. But yeah, that's the best way I could explain that. I could be wrong. What I found interesting, though, even though with the child that comes from a prostitute or from whoredom, it doesn't say forever. So I kind of wonder if there's even a. It doesn't say one way or other. It just says they can't enter the assembly. So there seems to be no time limit or forever mentioned. So there's no way to tell whether that's continuing or not.
It only says to the 10th generation, right?
It doesn't even say
Yes.
that in mine. It doesn't even say that.
Um,
I'm I'm literally looking at my net right now. All it says
oh yeah,
is
you're right. Okay.
it doesn't
Yeah,
even
that's
say
right.
anything.
Mhm.
So there's no way I can there's no way I can tell.
It only
Um,
says it differently in the Masoretic,
wow, so they add in something there? Okay.
even to the 10th generation.
Wow, interesting. Okay. Um, I would hope that's the case, that there's a time limit, but the LXX doesn't mention.
Well, I I know that's been a it's been a concern of mine, but I think that I put that concern to rest. You know, I believe that I have the Ruach of Yahuwah. Um, I my parents weren't married, you know, when they had me. That's recent news to me, but um, um, it is what it is. You know, at the end of time when we step into eternity, um, I believe that I belong to Yahuwah. I've seen too much evidence to say otherwise. And if I'm deceived, I'm deceived. If I'm, you know, Yahuwah is Yahuwah, and He is, who can argue with Yahuwah, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that originally was there in that verse and something happened when the Codex Vaticanus came out. Because it doesn't make sense for it to just be left open ended like that.
With all the other ones having a timeline.
Yeah, it's just out of Yahuwah's character to leave it open ended like
Right,
that.
right.
I'm kind of wondering the Vatican like started messing with stuff there. Let me just look at something. I want to look at the other versions of the Torah I have. I want to
Well,
look
the very first verse doesn't have a timeline, whether in the Masoretic or in the Septuagint. Just
yeah,
says he that is wounded.
yeah. The castrated makes sense though, because if that's willfully castrating yourself in
Right.
cold prostitution, then you're kind of like doing that to yourself. But a child that's born out of something out of
Yeah,
his control,
That's right. That's right.
that's why I think there has to be a time limit on that.
But like if it's a child born without his control and it says to the 10th generation, the way that I would see that, because a child, like if I was born, I'm not going to live to the 10th generation. I don't think. I think if it's saying that they shall not enter into the 10th generation, then what I see that meaning, if a prostitute has a child, um, that child will not enter in, his child will not enter in, his that child's child will not enter in, and so on and so forth. But once you get to that 10th generation, it's like the slate is wiped clean, and now that 10th generation down has a chance to enter in. But that curse lasts for 10 generations.
Right. Right.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I would just think though that like I could see there not being someone that's castrated themselves on purpose, not entering in at all. I could see that because you're basically you've participated. It's not just the act of castration. Like I said, if you look it up for yourself, there is pagan worship that includes that. It is Baal and Ashtaroth worship that's
Right.
included in that. So I can see that as being a forever thing, that anyone has done that. So that makes perfect sense to me.
These are curses, right? These are curses,
Yeah.
and not necessarily commands or instructions of Torah, but these are curses. So that if Yahusha lifted the curse of Torah, we still keep the commands, but the curses are not upon us. What would you say that these were lifted for those within? I don't know how to.
That's
I
a
think so.
deep topic,
It
and
is.
I can't say one way or another. I know for a fact that our past curses for breaking the Torah were definitely nailed to the stake. But as far as the curses in the Torah in general for people in general, like this, I don't know if he's done away with those curses. The whole male, like the eunuch thing, and now as far as the Ammonite and Moabite thing, I think by default that goes away because it's to the 10th generation, and you're way past the 10th generation on the Moabites and the Ammonites. So I don't think there's any way to really keep that curse anymore anyway. But as far as the son of the prostitute, I don't know. I really don't know because they're, I don't know how that works with, do all the curses go away, or do the curses for each individual that becomes a believer that would have been for them, he took those curses. So I don't know exactly if the curses disappear or if that he gave us a slate clean. You know what I'm saying? I don't think the curses are done away with. I know there's a belief out there about that. I don't think the curse of the law is done away with. I believe, I know there's people that do believe that, and that's a popular belief system in the Messianic movement. I'm not ready to ascribe to that. I don't see proof of that even in the Brit Hadashah, that we have no more curses of the law. If
Well,
that
with this one in particular, because I'm trying to think of examples of people that were in the assembly. Tamar comes to mind. I know she prostituted herself to her her stepdad, and yet that son was still in the assembly.
Yeah. Problem with that is that's pre-law of Moses. So technically, that's a little gray area there because that's, before he commanded this. So technically, it's kind of like how Judah and the other son did what they did, and how they sold their brother, and how they never got punished for it. I would say that's in kind of the mercy area. But it's kind of hard to make that argument. Like it's way before the law of Moses. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Brother Yahusha, you're not alone in this situation.
Yeah.
I was born from an affair. So I am in the same situation, but I have to say this. He would not have changed me the way he has.
Yeah.
He would not be showing me evidence of him every day in my life. I mean, there's too much evidence.
Yeah.
There's just too much evidence.
I personally believe I don't think it's about general whoredom. I don't think it's whoredom. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. It's the son of a prostitute, not just a bastard child. I think that it would be way too generalized of a curse. Yeah. It's just it's outside of Yahuwah's character to do that.
Well, one thing that comes to mind too is that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Yahuwah's character, he's a very specific Elohim. He doesn't generalize things. So, out of his character, for anyone that's been born out of wedlock, for lack of a better term. So, that half of the body of Messiah would not be able to be in the body of Messiah if that's the case.
That's exactly
so, go ahead, bro.
I think, too, some things that come to mind are that at this point in time, these are commands being given to Yashar. These commands, these commands still apply to us when we come into Yashar. But at the same time, we didn't have this Torah. We weren't given this Torah.
Yeah.
We didn't. They knew better. We didn't necessarily have this Torah to know to do better. That doesn't make it right. Another thing that comes to mind is that there's a gray area between what is, or maybe the gray area is not the word, but there's definitely what is marriage and what is not marriage, because I definitely don't believe marriage is going and paying a fee and getting married by a pastor and, putting on a pagan ring. That's definitely not marriage in the eyes of Yahuwah, So even if they had done that, they still wouldn't have been married in the eyes of Yahuwah, So how is there even real marriage in the eyes of Yahuwah for pagans? That would be my thought. Like, what would be marriage in paganry?
Now, in the old world, everyone married the same pretty much. The only difference is they would be married, maybe not under Yahuwah. They would be married under a pagan mighty one. They would still do the same things. They would still, come into covenant with one another before a mighty one. Like in ancient times, like basically it was a covenant. It was came in the covenant between two people, and Yahuwah was the witness. And then you have the two people. They have a covenant of what is to be done. There is do's and don'ts. Those are vows, right? So the way the world does marriage, they add things to it, but as far as the vows are a covenant. Even pagans are doing it whether they realize or not. The world's doing it whether they realize or not. The moment you say I do, the moment you are saying I agree to these terms, that's what vows are. Vows are a covenant. So anyone that just says marriage vows to a significant other, you're entering into covenant with that other person, into a marriage covenant. You don't need a pastor. You don't need your friends and family. That's all added. But as far as the vows, the way they do vows are biblical. Like, will you do this? I do. That. That's a covenant. So whether people realize it or not, they're getting into covenant with that person, and that they are married at that moment. That's why sex was really supposed to be reserved after you've come into covenant with that person. Sex was supposed to seal the covenant. It's meant to be the seal, not prior to the covenant. It's meant to be the outward seal of that covenant you just vowed to that other person. So in ancient times, they all did this. They all understood what marriage was. What happened was the pagan world eventually started changing things, especially with the Romans. Where we get the wedding ring from is the Romans. So, but if you go like to the book of Genesis and you look at Sarah and Abraham, and when they went into Egypt, right, that Pharaoh knew, like, okay, she's this guy's wife. I should not be knowing her. They understood what marriage was, is the point I'm making. Even the pagans in the ancient world, like in 1600 BC, to be specific, knew what marriage was. We don't today because of all this modernism and adding things in there. All you need to be married is a man with his wife, Yahuwah as the witness. Obviously, the pagans would have Baal as their witness, whatever. But Yahuwah is like basically witnessing you making marriage vows to your wife and vice versa. Once those vows are agreed upon, now you have agreed upon a covenant. And now you must keep your promises you made on those vows. So that's all it needs to take place for a marriage to happen. That's what happened on Mount Sinai. Same thing. So when we look at scripture, marriage is very simple. Many people go into marriages, they say their vows, they don't take it seriously. No. I promise to do this. Okay, I will do this. Will you do this? Okay, I do. That's a covenant. And literally, we see that in Exodus 20, right? Literally, or whenever Israel first says, "We will do this."
Yeah.
Marriage covenant, right there. So the whole world has been, I would say, in ancient times, most of the world was doing it the right way, as far as the vows are concerned, where they were the issue was their witness was a false mighty one, where Israel had Yahuwah as their witness, and I guess you could say the other two witnesses are heaven and earth. You know, so but the point is that that's all that's needed. Like this whole ceremony and this and that, that's added by man. That's not needed. So I usually tell people they want to get married, if they want to be married in Yahuwah, you know, you don't even need your family present. You really don't. I mean, you know, that's up to you whether you want to do that. So it's not even supposed to be a ceremony. That the whole ceremony thing happened like way late into history. Way late into history. So, but as far as the pagans go, they did have a concept of making vows to one another. The pagans did understand what it means to have a wife and be married, because obviously we see multiple kings that Abraham dealt with. They were like, "Why didn't you tell me it's your wife? What are you doing?" It's like there was morality. Back then, there was morality. There was a sense of, I can't have this man's wife. So, you know, I would say the idea of marriage in ancient times was like a universal understanding of what constitutes marriage. Whether they served the true Alua or not, they knew what marriage was. We don't, because you know America has bastardized marriage and has made it into something it's not, into this big ritual and ceremony, which is not really what it's supposed to be. You know, so that's how I would explain it to someone, that technically the pagans, the ancient pagans knew what marriage was. Now pagans now don't, because they've been you know, everyone's been Americanized to a certain extent. And this whole, I think where it started too was with the Christian church. They felt the need to have to include a priest and this and that. Same thing with Judaism. They felt like there needed to be a rabbi and this and that, you know. And the marriage license, I think, is solely, if I'm not mistaken, Mom, isn't the marriage license like solely an American idea? I
don't know.
I haven't heard of like any other like ancient culture that ever did that.
Well,
ever.
If it's a commonwealth, like in Canada,
Yeah.
if you're together a certain amount of years, you have what's known as a commonwealth marriage.
But do we have any proof prior to America becoming a country that they ever did that?
It wasn't even with, it wouldn't have been with the start of America. It would have been with the start of the United States, which is the government on top of America and the Constitution.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the earliest I know of that. That's the earliest I know of. I don't know any ancient culture that did that. I don't think the Romans even did that, to be honest. Marriage licenses and all that, I think the Romans did the ring thing, but you know, that had a lot to do with other things. I think that ring had to do with one of their gods, if I was to guess. The whole wedding ring thing goes back to some
probably Saturn, I would imagine.
Saturn, yeah, that would make sense. The rings, you know, the rings of Saturn, yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, so, but the other ancient cultures, I don't think they had wedding rings. Like you go back to Egypt, they weren't doing that. You go back to, you know, Babylon, they weren't doing that even. A lot of them, though, did exchange vows. They did the same concept of exchanging vows and saying I do and all that. Really, that's all that constitutes a marriage. In Yahuwah's eyes, you're married universally. You know, someone's married once they say I do to vows or promises. You know, and usually the vows are intertwined with being someone's significant other. Usually,
England, 1100 CE.
Yeah, very late. That's 1000 AD. Very late.
And we're the women.
It seems to go back farther. It seems to go back to the ancient Egyptians.
Okay.
Huh. The marriage license? Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The wedding rings.
Yeah, my mom.
Yeah.
My mom. What were you looking up, Mom?
I was looking up when the idea of a marriage license began.
Yeah.
And
So
it was England.
I figured that
in 1100.
So yeah, the Christian church probably created that. There's because you can't. That makes sense. That's the earliest you would have it is, you know, very close to the Middle Ages. I mean, the Middle Ages would have only been like 400 years after that. So, it's a very modern idea of marriage license.
This is interesting, though. The first recorded marriage of a man and a woman of a ceremony was 2350 BC in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. Their Mesopotamia did not exist in 2300 BC. Like Sumeria was not even founded that early, because 2300 BC, Mom, that would be you're almost talking about before the flood at that point. So I would disagree with their dating. They're probably one of those people that thinks the earth is older than what it is.
Oh, wow. We didn't start with a license until 1777.
Yeah.
So once we became,
Yeah, United States. Yeah. But yeah, I knew it was a modern idea, the marriage license. I knew that was a modern idea. But the wedding ring, that's interesting. It goes all the way back to Egypt. I wonder why they would incorporate that. Oh, you know what? Yeah, well, sun rays, halos. Okay, yeah, I could see where the wedding ring comes from, even in the Egyptian mythology, because they worship Ra, the sun god, the sun rays. The halo is a sun nimbus. Okay, so yeah, that's. But anyway, point is that scripturally, again, all you need to get married is vows and basically saying yes to those vows. You're married. In Yahuwah's eyes, that's all you need. Obviously, him as a witness, if you're in Yahuwah, he would be your witness, along with heaven and earth as the three witnesses. And there you go. So, but that's the basic oversimplified understanding of what constitutes a marriage biblically. And in the ancient times, like I said, like a lot of other things in the Bible, all the ancient civilizations agreed on what constitutes a marriage. So, but yeah, that's a good question. But yeah, so that's definitely been misconstrued in our modern society. So let's see here. Due to the fact that they did not meet you with bread. So this gives us a reason why.
Either reset your screen. I think it's stuck.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, let me try to go back. Let's see here. So if we look at go back to, let's see here, Deuteronomy 23 here. Yahuwah actually gives us a reason why he's cursing the Ammonites and Moabites. It says that due to the fact that they did not meet you with bread and water on the way when you were coming out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam son of Beor from Mesopotamia to curse you. And Yahuwah your Elohim did not want to listen to Balaam, and Yahuwah your Elohim turned the curses into barakas, because Yahuwah your Elohim loves you. You shall not address these things of shalom to them, and things of profit to them all your days forever. And again, I don't think it's forever, because as you see in the prior curse, it has to have a time limit on it. So I would say there's a certain age or time period he doesn't want Yashar to, speak peaceably to them. That would be my guess, since again, eon doesn't always mean forever. And even olam, the Hebrew word olam, can mean for a certain time period. You shall not abhor a Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor Egyptian, because you were a resident alien in his land. If sons are born to them in the third generation, they shall enter into the assembly of Yahuwah. Interesting. So I guess in both the Egyptians and the Edomites, as long they're only withheld from entering into the third generation, it seems like, if I'm reading that correctly. So once you get to the third generation, or I guess the fourth generation would you would be able to, Edomites and Mitzrites would be able to enter in. What's interesting about that commandment there, it says, you shall not hate them because he is your brother, which actually Yahuwah is talking about even in an ethnic sense, right? Because Esau was Jacob's brother. So to me, that's interesting. Also, there's an importance to this, especially those of you that have read the book of Maccabees, you'll notice, right, that the Spartans are claimed to be relatives of the Yahudim. Now, my theory is that the Spartans, historically, they're genetically go back to Esau. And the Spartans are part Roman, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a long, convoluted genealogy story, but I believe the reason the Spartans are being called their relatives is because Esau is Jacob's brother, you know, and all that. So it's kind of interesting. So let me see here.
I want to touch on that real quick. So most BHIs, they'll take Edom, or Esau, and they'll use the verses that take Esau. I believe some of Esau's descendants intermarried with some of the daughters of the Horites, but it was very few. That I think there was like 2 marriages that Scripture talks about, but then it also says that Esau wiped out the Horites that lived in Mount Seir. But through those 2 marriages, they make the claim that because Esau intermarried with the Horites, whom for whatever reason they believe were, Nephilim hybrid offspring, that Esau corrupted his seed. Now the problem with this is that, like, we have this verse right here saying that do not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. Whereas Esau dwelling in Mount Seir, 2 of the descendants mixing with the Horite women, this was way back, maybe like not way back, but maybe 2 generations prior to them coming to Mount Sinai. So it was quite back, and yet he's still called Esau is still called Yaakov's brother in this. And then, farther down the line, like you said with the Spartans, they're still considered relatives. If they were corrupted to the point where their genetics were no longer human, I really, really, really doubt that Yahuwah would be saying what he's saying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard of that doctrine. Usually they go more on a spiritual reason why they believe that Edomites can't come in, from what I've heard. More or less the Obadiah reason. And that they were pronounced to Yahuwah's wrath, and if Yahuwah's going to destroy all of them, how are they going to enter in? So usually that's the argument I usually hear BHIs saying to me. They rarely ever go with the Horite thing. So that's new to me.
They seem to be using scientific studies connecting the white man to Neanderthals and just rabbit trail, man. Like, I don't need science to tell me anything. Why am I going to start believing science now when science is, at least not so-called science, has lied to us about almost everything? Yeah. Why am I going to start trusting it now? Yeah. Scripture says what Scripture says. I don't need science to tell me that.
Yeah. And technically, right, Esau is way before Job, right? A lot of them don't want to pay attention to this. That clearly, the more accurate version of the book of Job tells you he's an Edomite. So if Edomites are not supposed to enter the assembly at all, and their corrupted lineage, why is Job in following Yahuwah and he's part of Israel? That would be my biggest trump card with them is, okay, you have literally Job, Edomite, ethnic Edomite, he's grafted in. You have Caleb, ethnic Edomite. Way after this, way after the Horite situation. So that Horite situation, there's a lot of flaws in it. And the whole Obadiah thing, we could spend a whole study about that, how the Obadiah thing does not negate Edomites from being grafted in. It's talking about Esau as Edom as a nation, and I would even argue that it's more or less spiritually connecting Edom to Mystery Babylon in that chapter of Obadiah, that one chapter. When you look at what it's talking about in context of the prophecy, it's talking about the you're going to hide yourself in the cleft of the rocks and this and that. When you look at that terminology, that's usually used for Babylon. So what I believe it's talking about is Edom as a nation would be the same as the last beast kingdom, which is Rome. And even the ancients believe that. They believe that the last fourth beast kingdom of Daniel was going to be Edom, aka Rome, the Byzantine part of the Roman Empire, which historically Edomites intermarried with the Byzantine Empire, and they became known as the Byzantine part of Rome. So when Yahuwah is talking about Obadiah 1 and he's pronouncing judgment on the Edomites, I think it's impossible to say that that's just talking about anyone that has Edomite blood in them. Because then you have a problem with Cornelius, who is a Roman, okay? In the Brit Hadashah, he's a Roman grafted in. So again, there's a lot of issues with that type of interpretation of Obadiah chapter 1. And a lot of people don't realize that it would contradict a lot of scriptures, especially in the Brit Hadashah, where it's almost universally accepted Yahusha was preaching to Romans. He was preaching to Roman Gentiles about the good news. You have Paul writing to a Roman assembly. Okay. Then you have to put Jesus on who he's talking to with his letters to the Roman assembly. So there's a lot of issues with that, why that's an incorrect understanding of Obadiah chapter 1. I believe, yes, it's physically talking about ethnic descendants of Esau, but it's not saying that every descendant of Esau is going to be destroyed and can never be grafted in. I don't think that's what Yahuwah is saying in Obadiah 1. Edom as a nation, if you look at that chapter, it clearly is paralleling with Revelation 17 of Mystery Babylon. Clearly paralleling. But anyway. See here. So I'm at verse 8 here, I believe. If sons are born to them in the third generation, they shall enter into the assembly of Yahuwah. Now, if you go out to encamp against your enemies, you shall guard against any evil thing. You shall guard. If there is a person among you who is not clean, from his flow at night, he shall go outside the camp, and he shall not enter into the camp. And it shall be at evening that he shall wash his body with water, and when the sun has set, he shall enter in the camp. So to me, that's clearly showing what constitutes a new day, the sun setting. Now he's clean. Now he can enter into the camp. Let's see here. And you shall have a place outside the camp. You shall go there outside. On your belt you shall have a pin, and it shall be when you sit down apart outside, that you shall dig a hole with it, and then returning the earth, you shall cover up your disgrace with it, because Yahuwah your Elohim walks about in your camp to deliver you, and to hand over your enemy before you. Your camp shall be set apart, and there shall not be seen a disgrace of matter among you, and he shall turn away from you. And I know there's people that want to twist this and say that Yahuwah is telling you to relieve yourself sexually outside the camp. That's not what it's saying. It's talking about going to the bathroom, okay? It's not talking about masturbation. I've seen so many people try to rationalize this. That's not what it's saying, okay? You can even go to the Greek word for fornication is porneia. So literally the word porn is in the Greek word for fornication, okay? So come on. So let's not try to rationalize things here, all right? It's clearly talking about the old understanding of relieving yourself in ancient times meant you went outside the camp, you relieved yourself, you did your business, and you had to cover it up with dirt, obviously. There was no such thing as bathrooms back then, okay? There was no indoor plumbing in the wilderness, okay? You shall not hand over to an owner a servant who has been added to you from his owner. He shall reside with you, among you. He shall live in every place wherever he may please. You shall not oppress him. Okay, there shall not be a prostitute among the daughters of Yasharal. There shall not be one that practices prostitution among the sons of Yasharal. There shall not be an initiate among the daughters of Yasharal. And there shall not be anyone initiated among the sons of Yasharal. You shall not bring the fee of a prostitute or exchange for a dog into the house of Yahuwah your Elohim for any vow. For it is abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim, in fact, both. So what is showing me here is Yahuwah hates prostitution. It's like something he will not allow at all. To the point that the money you get from a prostitute is considered an abomination. You shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money, interest on provisions, and interest on anything that be lent. To a stranger you shall charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, so that Yahuwah your Elohim may barak you in all your works in the land which you are entering there to inherit it. So this is, guys, what I always harp on. It is paramount to understand who your neighbor is. Okay? If you don't understand who your neighbor is, you're going to be deceived into thinking that this is universal commandment. Okay? It clearly is saying your brother. Okay? You don't charge interest to your brother. Okay? So the Israelites were free to charge interest to a Gentile. That's actually one of the smart things the Jewish people do today. If you ever notice, they charge interest to a Gentile that takes out a loan from them. Now, if you vow a vow to Yahuwah your Elohim, you shall not delay to pay it. For Yahuwah your Elohim, when he requires it, will require it of you, and it will be a sin with you. But if you do not want to vow it, it will not be sin to you. The things that proceed from your lips you shall guard. You shall do as you have vowed a gift to Yahuwah your Elohim, which you said with your mouth. Now, I wonder if the gift here is referring to an actual offering, if it's talking about giving a vow offering or promising a vow offering. Because it says, and you shall do as you have vowed a gift to Yahuwah your Elohim, which you said to your mouth. Like there's such things in the Torah as gift offerings. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, then you shall collect ears with your hand, and you shall not cast a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. And if you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you shall eat grapes as much as to fill your soul, but you shall not put any in a container. shall not cast a sickle on your neighbor's stone. So basically, it's saying you can't fully reap your brother's grain.
Mhm.
That belongs to your brother. That's the point. And if you go into your neighbor's vineyard, you shall not eat grapes as much as to fill your soul, but you shall not put any in a container. So basically, it's like you could have a sample, but you can't take the whole thing.
Right.
That's basically what it's saying. All right, that's the end of chapter 23. You okay, Mom?
Yeah, I'm good.
Do you want to read chapter 24?
Sure. Okay. If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house, and if after she leaves his house she becomes the wife of another man, and her second husband dislikes her and writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her from his house, or if he dies, then her first husband who divorced her is not allowed to marry her again after she has been defiled. That would be detestable in the eyes of Yahuwah. Do not bring sin upon the land that Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. If a man has recently married, he must not be sent to war or have any other duty laid on him. For 1 year he is to be free to stay at home and bring happiness to the wife he has married. Do not take a pair of millstones, not even the upper one, as security for a debt, because that would be taking a man's livelihood as security. If a man is caught kidnapping one of his brother Israelites and treats him as a slave or sells him, the kidnapper must die. You must purge the evil from among you. In cases of leprous diseases, be very careful to do exactly as the priests who are Levites instruct you. You must follow carefully what I have commanded them. Remember what Yahuwah your Elohim did to Miriam along the way after you came out of Egypt. When you make a loan of any kind to your neighbor, do not go into his house to get what he is offering as a pledge. Stay outside and let the man to whom you are making the loan bring the pledge out to you. If the man is poor, do not go to sleep with his pledge in your possession. Return his cloak to him by sunset so that he may sleep in it. Then he will thank you, and it will be regarded as a righteous act in the sight of Yahuwah your Elohim. Do not take advantage of a hired man who is poor and needy, whether he is brother Israelite or an alien living in one of your towns. Pay him his wages each day before sunset, because he is poor and is counting on it. Otherwise, he may cry to Yahuwah against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sin. Do not deprive the alien or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and Yahuwah your Elohim redeemed you from there. That is why I command you to do this. When you are harvesting in your field, and you overlook a sheep, do not go back to get it. Leave it for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that Yahuwah your Elohim may baruch you in all the work of your hands. When you beat the olives from your trees, do not go over the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow. When you harvest the grapes in your vineyard, do not go over the vines again. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. That is why I command you to do this.
So let's see here. Yeah, I'm definitely. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is where you gotta be careful with the Masoretic text, and this is why people think that you can't divorce someone unless they've committed whoredom, because unfortunately the Masoretic text uses the word uncleanness here. Septuagint doesn't. It says unbecoming, which again is not limited to fornication. So it's important to understand this. You can divorce someone without fornication taking place. There is no law in the Torah that says you have to have someone cheat on you. This is the problem with the Masoretic text. They change it. They change it from unbecoming to shameful or uncleanness, which is a completely different thing. So the Greek for indecent, this is the Greek word here. So askemon, deformed, indecent, unseemly. Okay. So again, it can mean inelegant, uncomely. So this is a concept of there's many different reasons a man is lawfully able to divorce his wife. One of the reasons can be if a woman's not acting like a righteous wife, she's, arguing with her husband all the time. She's not a good host. She's not being submissive to her husband. That alone can be a reason, righteously, according to Scripture, you can divorce your wife. Because ultimately she's not being elegant, she's not being comely, she's not being what she's supposed to be as a wife. So we need to understand this, that and this is why I really stress people to give the Septuagint a try, because this is the difference of not having a contradiction in Scripture, because people love to use this and say, oh, well, see, you can only divorce your wife for the case of fornication. If that's the case, Deuteronomy 21 makes no logical sense. I'm just going to go to you real quick, because Deuteronomy 21 has nothing talking about fornication here, okay, at all. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so let's just go to. All right, so if a man has two wives, the one, okay, hold on. No, let's go to the prior one here. So it says, this is talking about taking a captive woman from the nation's prisoner, and that you have the option to make her your wife. It says, okay, so starting at verse 11, it says, if you should see among the spoil a woman beautiful in countenance, and should desire her, and take her for yourself, for a wife, you should bring her within your house. Then you shall shave her head and pare her nails, and shall take away her garments of captivity from off her. She shall abide in your house, and shall bewail her father and mother the days of a month. Afterwards you shall go into her, dwell with her, and she shall be your wife, showing that sex is the seal of marriage there. She shall become your wife. And it shall be, if you do not delight in her, it does not say fornication, it says if you do not delight in her anymore, you shall send her out free, and she shall not by any means be sold for money. You shall not treat her contemptuously, because you have humbled her. Again, example there, humbling, being used as a general word for, obviously, you took away her chastity, okay? Has nothing to do with rape, okay? So that's another misconception we have, that every time we see the word humbled in a sexual sense, we think it's rape. No. Okay? So again, this is clearly showing that it's a much broader allowance for divorce. You don't have to have someone cheat on you. So that's a false doctrine from evangelical Christianity based on, because they have the Masoretic text. That's why. The Masoretes, for whatever reason, decided to change uncomely to, uncleanness for whatever reason. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Let's see here. So she becomes man's. All right. All right. Let me know if it gets back to you. I'll let you go.
I think Milka had a question though.
Oh, go ahead, Sister Milka. I don't know if you.
It's okay. We kind of passed it at this point, but
okay.
I think it was like I think it was the last chapter. I guess my question is it talks about making a vow, and like making a promise, and it also talks about that in Numbers 30. But my question is what if you make a promise with someone, but that person ends up breaking the promise, so you can't fulfill your end of the promise, if that makes sense. I don't know.
I don't know how that works. I guess the person who broke their part of the promise would have to repent. Now, if you make a promise to just a general unbeliever, I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
Because his Torah is given to Israel. I know that's unpopular opinion, but Israel was the only people he made a covenant with at Mount Sinai. So as far as vows go, it's kind of like if they break a promise to you, I don't know how that works. Obviously, they're going to be judged on Judgment Day. Don't get me wrong. It's like, how would they repent if they don't believe in Yahuwah? It's kind of like they're not in relationship with him. It's kind of like, there's nothing they can really do. They're just bringing up more of his wrath upon them by doing that. As far as if you break a promise to Yahuwah, like if any of one of us would break a promise to Yahuwah unintentionally, I think the only thing you can do, since there's no Levitical priesthood or anything, you have to
just repent.
Yeah. That's the only thing I can think of. But I also want to make it clear, like, studying into this topic about vows, I believe there has to be an intention of making a vow. It can't be like you're praying to Yahuwah and you're speaking about hypotheticals. I don't think that's a vow. Like a vow has to be on purpose, intentfully saying, I'm going to do this, Yahuwah. I'm promising you I'm going to do this. That's a vow. So I don't want people getting confused, because the enemies try to confuse me in past times of that. Trying to, basically make me generalize something like that, when it's very clear that when someone makes a vow, it's like a covenant. It's like you're promising Yahuwah you're definitely going to do that thing. For example, Yahuwah promised to Abraham that his seed would become a multitude of nations. That's a vow. That's the best way I could explain it. And most of the times in scripture, vows are like definite. They're not like, hypothetical. They're definite. They're like, okay, or if they're not definite, they're conditional, where Yahuwah vows to David, there's never going to be a descendant of yours failing from your throne as long as your descendants obey me. That's a conditional vow. So usually that's what a vow in context is. So I don't want people getting getting afraid and stuff and thinking, well, I was just praying to Yahuwah one time about hypotheticals. If I was wrong about something, I would have to repent of it and take a course of action to fix it. That's not a vow. That's, you're praying in hypotheticals. It's not a vow. So just I want to put people at ease here. I don't want. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a very good friend where I work. She's still a good friend. I'm in contact once in a while with her. I loaned her, and it was we both understood it was a loan of some substantial money. It was more than a couple of dollars, and she, I've known everything. She's had a kid in prison and all kinds of things that it has been very difficult for her financially. And every time she saw me, oh, Miss Sharon, I'm so good. And after I came into Torah, and I prayed about it, and I said to her, this is a gift, okay? You do not owe me anything. This is my gift to you. And she was like, no, 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 Miss Sharon. I said, no, yes, yes, yes. This is what we're gonna say, okay? This is a gift, and I don't want you feeling any kind of burden over this. That's how I left it. And I felt like that's what, even though she's not a sister, she's not a sister. She's in Christianity, I think, somewhat, but any which way, she's not a sister. So I felt like, I was not, I was showing some, what's the word?
Favor.
Yes, some
That's
favor to her. And that's what I felt was the right thing to do.
What you did, Mom, was go above beyond. What we have to understand in this walk, there's what's required, a have to, in the Torah, and then there's being nice or going above and beyond. That's all you did. You showed a little extra favor, which is not a bad thing. But we have to make sure we don't add to the Torah.
Right.
And think that's required. It's not required. I know a lot of people take Matthew 5 and think they kind of ecumenicalize it, but what you need to understand is Yahusha can't contradict himself. He cannot contradict what he already said in the Torah. And it's very clear you treat Gentiles different than you treat your brother and sister. So we need to understand that at the same time. That if you want to give a gift to someone, it's not sin. You're just going above and beyond and being nice. But at the same time, there's a difference between that and what's required. So we do need to understand that. I don't think you did anything wrong by what you did. You just went above and beyond. You were extra nice to that person. So there's nothing wrong with that. Where it becomes wrong is where we start thinking that's required, that we have to do that. And so it's important to understand. Also, it's important to understand what a loan is and what a gift is. A gift is a gift. A loan is a loan. A loan is to be paid back. So when you loan to a Gentile, you are completely allowed to charge interest. And it's very clear, it says it right in the chapter there. So, but I think the biggest problem is we don't understand the difference between a loan and a gift. A gift is meant to never be paid back. A loan is. A loan, you're letting someone borrow, versus a gift is you're freely giving something to someone. So I think that's another problem is we misunderstand the difference between the two. But no, you did the right thing. You did the right thing. She was in hard times. You wanted to help her out.
And honestly, I know full well she would have never been able to pay this back. And honestly, I just felt like it's the right thing to do. I had just entered Torah, so I didn't fully understand all of this, but I just felt it was the right thing to do, to execute some, like you say, favor and some mercy on her, because I don't want her going around feeling guilty every time she sees me.
Yeah.
And
And again, the whole pledge in that day was like collateral. So what he's talking about, he says, your neighbor, your brother or sister. He's not talking about everyone here. He's talking about your brother or sister owes you something. They're in debt to you. You don't take their clothing as a pledge. They need their clothing. That's the whole point. But again, it's isolated. It's not talking about the whole world. It's not talking about, because really the way Yahuwah designed Israel, he designed it so they wouldn't have to. If they did everything they told them to do, that he told them to do, they would not have to ask for money from the nations. That's the point. A lot of the Torah is only focusing on Israel. So that's what you need to understand. The context of the majority of the Torah is talking about how Israel is to treat one another, how brothers and sisters are to treat one another, not the whole world. So that's again something we have to really understand, because a lot of these commandments don't even talk about the world. It says your neighbor, your brother, specific. By giving back, you shall give his pledge back by sunset. Again, start of a new day. Okay, and he shall sleep in his garment, and barak you, and you shall be mercy before Yahuwah your Eluah. And it tells us about don't unrighteously withhold the wages. And again, the whole world does this. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. The whole world is guilty of this. They don't pay you until every Friday or every other Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a sin in Yahuwah's eyes.
Yeah,
okay,
that's true.
Because it says that you're not supposed to withhold the wages of a needy and indignant person from your brothers, again, from your brothers, or from the guests in your cities. You shall pay his wages daily. The sun shall not set before it because he is needy, and on it he has his expectation. He shall not cry to Yahuwah against you, and it shall be sin for you. So again, the whole purpose of a lot of these commandments, the reason it's only for Israel is because Yahuwah's original intention was to give his people this land, right? So who's living on this land? Only Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's saying brother, 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 because that's the only people living on this land.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that too, is that really the only people that were supposed to be in the land of Canaan, they did their job, was Israel, and that's it. The Canaanites were supposed to be utterly wiped out. All the old inhabitants were supposed to be wiped out. It was only supposed to be Israel on that land. And obviously strangers, if they wanted to join Israel, or you had passersby coming into the land or whatever, but for the most part, it was supposed to be only Israel in the land of Canaan. So it says, fathers shall not die for their children, sons shall not be put to death for their fathers. Each one shall die for their own sin. I've seen so many non-New Testament Israelites trying to use this verse and saying, well, this is why the Messiah can't die for the sins of the people, because then he's dying for someone else's sin. And what people don't understand is this is talking about capital punishment. It's saying that each person shall be put to death for their own sin. Mm-hmm. And it's talking about mortal men. It's not talking about if the Creator wanted to redeem us from sin, coming in the flesh to redeem his creation. So, you have to take these commandments in context. You shall not divert the right ruling of a guest or an orphan or a widow. You shall not take a widow's garment in pledge. You shall remember that you were domestic, or, a slave in the land of Egypt. And Yahuwah your Eluah redeemed you from there. On account of this, I command you to do this thing. Now, if you harvest, and talks about harvesting the field, do not forget a sheaf in your field. You shall not return to take it. It shall be for a guest and an orphan and widow, so that Yahuwah your Eluah may barak you in all the works of your hands. If you gather olives, you shall not return to glean what is behind you. Behind you, it shall be for the guest and the orphan and the widow. You shall remember that you were a domestic servant in the land of Egypt. On account of this, I command you to do this thing. And if you harvest your vineyard, you shall not reharvest it. For the things behind you, it shall be for the guest and for the orphan and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a domestic in the land of Egypt. On account of this, I command you to do this thing. So basically, he's trying to say, don't hate the strangers, because you were strangers in Egypt. You were slaves in Egypt. And obviously, do not oppress the orphan and the widow and all that. But yeah, self-explanatory stuff. Very self-explanatory. Yeah.
Think of Ruth, she was gleaning, and she was basically surviving on what she was gleaning.
And she was a stranger.
Yes.
She was a Moabite. She was a stranger gleaning from Boaz's harvest. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. and actually, that is really the context of the commandment about the poor and all that. A lot of times when Yahuwah would say the poor, he would be talking about, the poor stranger that's within your gates, that's in your cities, mm-hmm. that they were responsible for feeding. Let's see here. So we're at, I think, 25 now. Brother Dennis, would you like to read chapter 25 for us? I think you're unmuted.
Oh, hold on. I don't know if I'll be able to right now. I got to go to the bathroom.
Oh, okay. We can have another reader. That's not a big deal. Sister Milka, would you like to read chapter 25?
Sure.
Okay. Let me mute myself.
Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Yep, ready.
If there be a controversy between men, and they come unto judgment, that the judges may judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. And it shall be, if the wicked man be worthy to be beaten, that the judge shall cause him to lie down, and to be beaten before his face, according to his fault, by a certain number. 40 stripes he may give him, and not exceed, lest if he should exceed, and beat him above these with many stripes, then your brother should seem vile unto you. You shall not muzzle the ox when he treads out the grain. If brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the woman of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her man's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him to be his woman, and perform the duty of a man's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn she bears shall exceed in the name of his brother who died, that his name be not put out of Yasharal. And if the man like not to take his brother's woman, then let his brother's woman go up to the gate unto the elders, and say, my man's brother refuses to raise up unto his brother a name in Yasharal. He will not perform the duty of my man's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him, and speak unto him. And if he stand to it, and say, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's woman come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house. Sorry. Okay. And his name shall be called in Yasharal, the house of him that has his shoe loosed. And this is what happened with Ruth. Okay, sorry. I'm continuing. When men strive together one with another, and the woman of the one draws near for to deliver her man out of the hand of him that smites him, and puts forth her hand and takes him by the secrets, then you shall cut off her hand. Your eyes shall not pity her. You shall not have in your bag diverse weights, a great and a small. You shall not have in your house diverse measures, a great and a small. But you shall have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure shall you have, that your days may be lengthened in the land Yahuwah gives you. For all that do such things, and all that do unrighteously, are an abomination unto Yahuwah. Remember what Amalek did unto you by the way, when ye were come forth out of Mitzrayim, how he met you by the way, and smote the hindmost of you, even all that were feeble behind you, when you were faint and weary, and he feared not Yahuwah. Therefore it shall be, when Yahuwah has given you rest from all your enemies round about, in the land Yahuwah gives you for an inheritance to possess it, that you shall blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, and you shall not forget it. Sorry, I started laughing because I started to see the physical, like what would happen. Sorry, I didn't mean to be disrespectful to Yahuwah if I was, so I repent of that.
I've always just kind of wondered why this, if a man is not wanting to, like, it seems to be a command that this man would go in and marry uh, his brother's widow. So he's already breaking the command once. So I don't know why he would actually allow himself to come before the elders, allow them to loose his shoe, allow himself to be spat at in the face. I mean, I get the concept, but I don't know why the man would allow that. If he's already disobeying the command to begin with.
Probably what would happen, I would assume, is that you have the whole elders probably bringing him to the court, and whether he wants to or not, and kind of like almost like, I lack for a better word, like how a mob would do it. You would probably have the whole council of the judges, all the men, all the ancestral leaders physically taking him from his house and be like, all right, well, since you don't want to do this, we're going to force you to go to the court. We're going to do this to you, whether you like it or not. Kind of like how, no, the person that's getting stoned has no say so.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same thing, like the way Israel would do it and how Yahuwah would conduct their court. It's like, if the person's guilty, they have no right to refuse their judgment. He could try to run away, but you got the whole city looking for him. So he could try to run away and, not have to be spit in the face, and all that, but they're going to eventually catch him. So, yeah, I could see it as they're more like he's not going to be like willfully wanting this to happen. It's going to be forced on him to be,
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see a lot of this with Boaz, the story of Boaz. A lot of these commandments here. The guy that was supposed to originally marry Ruth didn't want to marry her, so this had to be done to him. If you remember the full story of the book of Ruth, at the end, this guy that didn't want to be her kinsman redeemer, got spat on, and Boaz decided to be the kinsman redeemer. So a lot of these commandments we see later on fulfilled in the book of Ruth. Now, verse 11 always cracked me up, man. I'm telling you right now, I would let no woman do that to me, man. You would have to pin me down to allow a woman to do that. Ain't happening. A woman's gonna try to constrain the guy that's fighting her husband and try to, pull on his manhood. I have never let that happen. So I could understand why Yahuwah, has the woman's hand getting cut off, because that's
Yeah.
that's not right at all.
Yeah, it's not.
So it's interesting too. It says in verse 11, it says a man with his brother. So again, this is talking about within Israel. Obviously, a lot of the judgment and court stuff was for Israel, like within Israel, like how Israel was to, conduct themselves in their government. So, giving you allotment. Oh yeah, do not have unrighteous weights and measures. That's one thing Yahuwah hates is unequal weights and measures. He says it multiple times. Matter of fact, Proverbs, I think, says it like 10 or 20 different times. So it's one of the sins that's like abomination. It's very, very strong, high sin on the list. That is a very strong one we got to be careful of. I think sometimes we forget about the spiritual application of, equal weights and measures, and we tend to only focus on the physical aspect of it, which obviously would be the buying, the selling. You'll see in Amos chapter 8 where, these wicked people were actually so focused on money, they couldn't wait until the Sabbath was over to sell grain and make the measurements unequal, right? Amos 8:5, I'm talking about. So you'll see that Israel at one point, man, they were doing really unrighteous weights and measures in a physical sense. Now, in a spiritual sense, you could apply on unequal measures to, like, playing favoritism. In a spiritual perspective. If you favor someone, if there comes to be a Matthew 18 meeting, and let's just say I, favor someone over another, I'm guilty of unequal weights and measures in a spiritual aspect. So that's something all of us need to be careful of. But I've been guilty in the past of that. So that's just something we gotta be conscious of. But that's really what stood out to me in this chapter. See here. Amalek, interestingly, has a curse on him here. What he did to you on the way to Egypt, how he withstood you on the way and cut off your tail. That's got to be something spiritual. I mean, we don't have tails, so I don't know what that's allegorically referring to. Maybe talking about how he withstood them in the way, or maybe blocked them from passing through, possibly in an allegorical sense.
Yeah, when they were leaving Mitzrayim or Egypt, the stragglers, the old people and the young children, and some of the animals were in the back, and they snuck up on them and started killing as many as they could. The last end of them.
Yeah. I don't think Yahuwah holds that against you, sis. I mean, he has a sense of humor. Knowing his character a bit, he has a sense of humor. I mean, he was facetious with the Pharisees. He was knowing how Yahusha was when he was on earth. Yahuwah definitely has a similar sense of humor. I think that's part of, especially us men being made in his image, we have a similar sense of humor. And I can be facetious.
We got it from him.
I kind of have that jerkish type of humor sometimes, like he did. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely Yahuwah has a bigger sense of humor than we realize. And I think sometimes we get a little uptight due to our church upbringing. We think like every little thing offends him.
Yeah, that's true.
And we almost get to a point where we start thinking like every little thing offends him. But I can definitely understand your fear. You just don't want to, you don't want to make him upset. But yeah, I don't think he was offended by you.
Yeah, I didn't know where that came from. It was literally out of nowhere. So
I mean, verse 11 is definitely funny. I could see someone laughing at that. I mean, definitely I can from a man's perspective, I would not appreciate that being done to me at all. Yeah, so I can understand why Yahuwah says her hand's gonna get cut off. Yeah, I could understand that. That's you're messing with someone's progeny there. The men.
For me, it was actually, I don't even want to say, but it was just like the imagery of when I was reading it, and I was like, oh man, what is happening right now? But anyway, yeah.
Oh yeah, and I've seen situations where I would see a woman possibly do that because they probably see their man getting beat up and they're like, oh well, if I do this, they'll stop the guy from beating up my boyfriend or my husband. I could definitely see the world doing that. Trying to find any way to stop the guy from beating up their significant other. So go ahead, Mom.
No, you young people are a little too young for this whole scenario.
Oh,
but
no.
Dennis and I would definitely remember this.
Oh, no.
It was in the news for a very long time and the butt of a joke. There was a woman named Lorena Bobbitt whose husband cheated on her. And after finding out, she cut her man's thing off.
What?
Yeah.
Yep,
It was the longest. I mean, it was the butt of a joke for the longest. Yeah, her name was Lorena Bobbitt, and that actually happened. Yes.
Why would you make a
Yep.
joke out of that? That's really not funny.
I know, but you know this wicked world that we're living in.
That's not funny at all for multiple reasons. The reason Yahuwah takes it so serious is because that's a man's ability to have to give the woman the fruit of the womb.
That's
so
true.
when
That's
a woman does that, she's not really punishing the guy, she's punishing herself.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that's what the heathen don't realize. Like you're
Yep.
you know, that's very serious in Yahuwah's eyes. That's why he says if a woman's even tugging on the guy's stuff, their hand gets chopped off. You don't, you don't. That's
well, that was actually
it's
something
serious.
that happened.
It's serious to Yahuwah. That's you know that's his baraka is the fruit of the womb, as Job says, and as Proverbs says. So yeah, you're kind of messing with Yahuwah's baraka then when you're doing that. So it's a very serious thing. But yeah. So let me see here. This last part of the chapter, something about Amalek here. So gives you rest from all your enemies who surround you in the land that Yahuwah your Lord is giving you as allotment to inherit. You shall blot out the name of Amalek from under the sky. You shall not forget. Now, blotting out the name of the Amalekites would literally mean like you're blotting out the remembrance. You're also blotting out. You're like literally exterminating them. Who is saying like to exterminate them basically? Now,
under the ban.
Yeah, that's what they were supposed to do, but obviously, there's reasons to believe they definitely failed. Number one is because many of the even other tribes they were supposed to destroy survived to the time of Solomon even. So there's many witnesses in scripture showing that even though Yahuwah commanded them to do it, they didn't exactly do it. So, all right, brother, you're back. Would you like to finish us out in chapter 26?
Oh, let's see. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect, brother, perfect.
Okay. And it shall be when you come into the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance, and you possess it and dwell in it, that you shall take some of the first of all the fruits of the soil which you bring from your land that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, and shall put it in a basket and go to the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell there. And you shall come to one who is priest in those days and say to him, I shall declare today to Yahweh your Elohim that I have come to the land which Yahweh swore to our fathers to give us. And the priest shall take the basket from your hand and place it before the altar of Yahweh your Elohim. And you shall answer and say before Yahweh your Elohim, my father was a perishing Aramean, and he went down to Mitzrayim and sojourned there with few men. And there he became a nation, great, mighty, and numerous. But the Mitzrites did evil to us, and afflicted us, and imposed hard labor on us. Then we cried out to Yahweh Elohim of our fathers, and Yahweh heard our voice, and saw our affliction, and our toil, and our oppression. And Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand, and with an outstretched arm, and great fear, and with signs and wonders. He brought us to this place and has given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, see, I have brought the first fruits of the land which you, O Yahuwah, have given me. And you shall place it before Yahweh your Elohim, and bow down before Yahweh your Elohim, and shall rejoice in all the Tob which Yahweh your Elohim has given to you in your house. And you and the Levite and the stranger who's among you. When you have completed tithing all the tithe of your increase in the 3rd year, which is the year of tithing, and have given it to the Levite, to the stranger, to the fatherless, and to the widow, and they have eaten within your gates and have been satisfied, then you shall say before Yahuwah your Elohim, I have put away the set apart portion from my house, and also have given it to the Levite, and to the stranger, and to the fatherless, and to the widow, according to all your command which you have commanded me. I have not transgressed your commands, nor have I forgotten. I have not eaten any of it when in mourning, nor have I removed any of it for any unclean use, nor given any of it for the dead. I have obeyed the voice of Yahuwah, my Elohim. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look from your set-apart dwelling place, from the Shemaim, and Barak your people, Yisrael, in the land which you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. Today, Yahuwah, your Elohim, is commanding you to do these laws and right rulings, and you shall go and do them with all your heart and with all your being. You have today caused Yahuwah to proclaim to be your Elohim, and to walk in his ways and guard his laws and his commands and his right rulings, and to obey his voice. Yahweh has caused you to proclaim today to be his people, a treasured possession, as he has spoken to you, and to guard all his commands, so as to set you high above all nations which he has made, for a praise and for a name, and for esteem, and for you to be a set-apart people to Yahuwah, your Elohim, as he has spoken. That kind of reminds us of America used to be above all the other nations. Jacob's trouble we're in now.
You can't isolate these verses, and I mean, I'm sure we know that, but
Yeah.
we see how Christians like isolate these verses. Like, I can see how you can look at this as the land that he's bringing you into, and bringing your first fruits of whatever job it is that you're working at, and bringing it to the to the pulpit. And I think verse 14 though really stuck out. In my distress I did not eat of them. I have not gathered of them for an unclean purpose. I have not given of them to the dead. I have hearkened to the voice of Yahuwah, our Eloah. I have done as you have commanded me. This just shows you how serious, if something has been dedicated to Yahuwah, you don't touch it. If you're starving, you know,
that got his attention, didn't
it? I think though, if I would compare this to the story with Daoud, I would imagine that what Daoud ate was already left over from the previous day. It hadn't been immediately right then and there offered up to Yahuwah. It would have had to have been was what he ate of the showbread, right?
Yeah, I think it was probably the priest portion. If I was to piggyback off of what you just said, yeah, I agree. It would have been like what was supposed to be left for the Levites is what he ate. Just because the priest even said to me, he's like, "Are you clean? Are you ceremonially clean?" So, like, basically, what I mean is the concept of the Torah, right? The priests had to eat certain offerings, including, the showbread was left over sometimes with grain offerings. They had to eat it in a set apart place and be clean. So basically the priest is kind of hinting at what that showbread was for. It was, it was basically the priest's portion. And so that's why he had asked Daud and his men, have you known a woman? Are you clean? Because when you know a woman, and this is not sin, by the way. I know a lot of people get confused with ceremonial uncleanness and sin. When you know your wife, you're ceremonially unclean until the next day. So that's why he's asking Daud, have you and your men known a woman? Like right now, have you known a woman recently? Because if they were, they couldn't eat the bread. So I believe the context of that agrees with what Brother Yahusha just said. It would have been something left over from the offering that the priests were, it was their portion to eat. And we see that, in Torah. We see that in Leviticus. Every time, like, for example, not just the bread, but the shoulder piece was their food, their portion. They don't have a portion of land with the children of Israel, but they have the sacrifices, the burnt offerings. So yeah, we definitely see that concept Brother Yahusha mentioned all over the Torah. And I would agree, it was probably something left over from the offering. Probably a sheaf offering, or trying to think what else it could have been. It could have been any type of grain offering. But yeah. So, which, in a way, it was sin for him to eat it because he's not a priest. But at the same time, it's like, what is the more important? What is the bigger issue here? What's the bigger part of Yahuwah's will? The ordinance or not dying. Yahuwah wanted to preserve Daud, and so Yahuwah showed him favor for that time, because technically it is a sin to eat what's left for a priest, and you're not a priest. That's breaking the Torah. That's why Yahusha said to the Pharisees, he's like, you're worried about me picking grain. When our ancestor Daud ate bread that's supposed to be for a priest. So that was kind of his point to the Pharisees. Like, you're worried about us plucking grain, which is not even commanded not to do in the Torah. There's no violation there. When Daud was shown mercy when eating the priest's bread. So that was kind of the purpose of why Yahusha brought that up to them. And, that was kind of the purpose, is sometimes the necessity of survival supersedes the ordinance. And that's what he's showing, is sometimes you got to go with the heart of the law versus the letter of the law. If that makes any sense. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
Oh, I would agree, but I would only take that and I know this is not what you're saying, but for anyone that might watch this, I would only take that so far. I definitely, if I was dying of hunger, pork would not be going into my mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No, that's and actually, to use Christian terminology, that's a moral command versus a ceremonial command, if we really want to use those terms. Eating pork would be morally incorrect. The priest's bread, that's a ceremonial Levitical command and is only in a specific priesthood. You don't see that in a Melchizedek priesthood. You don't see that, in the priesthood that we're in right now. We can't even really apply that, the showbread thing. So, there's a huge difference between the two. Huge difference. Even levels of sin, we're talking about huge differences. You're talking about one that's an abomination versus one that is breaking an ordinance, but a much lesser ordinance in Yahuwah's eyes. Someone eating pork in his eyes is a high greater sin Yeah, that was a very two point.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and I could see Christianity taking that and then making allowances for not keeping the Sabbath and stuff like that, and missing the whole point. Yahusha, what him and his disciples did was not even breaking the Sabbath, but he's pointing out that when it comes to extreme situations, sometimes Yahuwah will give favor to someone when it's a greater necessity. I'll give you an example. Was it perfect in Yahuwah's eyes to have Adam and Eve's children marry one another? No, but it was a necessity. They were the only humans living at that time, so they had to commit incest before the law of Moses to populate the world. So that's what you call, the Yahuwah's greater purpose versus an ordinance. Technically, an ordinance that wasn't even given yet. Technically, to be fair, but still, there's certain situations where Yahuwah gives an exception to the rule, and because of his greater purpose, like we talked about earlier with Tamar, that he gives exceptions to stuff like that. And to be fair, she didn't know that she was sleeping with her father-in-law. To be fair, she was, wearing prostitute clothes, but she didn't know she was prostituting herself to her dad, to her father-in-law. She had no idea that was him.
Didn't know.
Oh no, she did know. Let me correct myself. Yes, she did know. He didn't know. I'm sorry, my bad. Let me correct myself. Sorry about that. Got it. Vice versa. Okay, so he didn't know it was her, because she covered herself. So yeah, but yeah, Yahuwah sometimes will use situations like that for his greater purpose. The greater purpose was now you have Judah's lineage saved. Which clearly is the case. If she's a Shemite, you have Judah now having children through her instead of through a Canaanite woman. And so, according to a lot of the traditions, even certain rabbinical sages who wrote the Targums believe that's what happened, that she was a descendant of Shem, and through her, you have Messiah's lineage continuing. And since all the sons he had from the Canaanite woman were dead, that Canaanite lineage kind of, for a brief time, stops there. And so, I believe it was Yahuwah's plan the whole time with what happened with Tamar.
Yeah, I do too.
Even though one of the Canaanite sons could have done the righteous thing and, had seed through her, it probably was Yahuwah's will for them to be vessels of wrath and out of the way. Unfortunately, I'm not going to claim to know his full counsel and his full will, but I'm just saying from what I've seen from that Tamar story, that's what I get. But anyway, so I think that's about it here. Don't see just trying to see if there's anything else that stuck out to me. Obviously, talked about how when something's set apart to Yahuwah, under no circumstances do you take it for yourself. Do not give it to the dead. Wow,
Yeah, it's almost
6:30. You shall rejoice. Now, if you finish paying all your tithe or produce, okay, and give the second tithe to the Levite, the guest, and the orphan widow, they shall, even if your cities, you shall say, widow, in accordance with all the commandments that you command me, I have not transgressed your commandment, nor have I forgotten it, and I have not eaten from them in my grief. Now, what it seems like, I know there's this doctrine out that supposedly it's a sin to eat when you're mourning. I don't believe that personally. I don't see that as a commandment in Scripture. Fast when you're mourning. What he's saying here is that I've not eaten that portion that's set apart to Yahuwah in my grief. So we have to look at the context of verse 14 there. I have not enjoyed the fruits from them for nothing, something unclean. I have not given any of them to the dead. That really stuck out to me. I have not given them to the dead. Well, I can think of multiple cultures, excuse me, guys, that do that today in a weird worship type of thing. Like you have, what is that? Dia del, I know I'm going to butcher this pronunciation. Dia del Muertes, the Day of the Dead.
Mexico.
In Mexico, where they give cakes to the dead.
Yeah, they do.
Like this is a real thing, guys. This is like a worship thing. Okay, giving your food to the dead, like putting food at a gravestone. I obeyed the voice of Yahuwah, my Eluah. I did just as you commanded me. Look down from your set apart house from heaven and Barak, your people Yashra, and the land that you gave them, as you swore to our fathers to give us a land of flowing with milk and honey. This very day, Yahuwah your Eluah is commanding you to do all of these statutes and right rulings, and you shall keep them and do them with the whole of your heart, with the whole of your soul. Today you have chosen Eluah to be your Eluah and to walk in his ways and to keep his statutes and his right rulings, obey his voice. Today also Yahuwah has chosen you to be his exceptional people, as he said, to keep all his commandments, and that you be high above all nations, as he has made you renowned and a boast, esteemed, that you be a people set apart to Yahuwah your Eluah, as he spoke. So what I really took out of that is that Yahuwah intended his people to be above the nations. Now, because of their disobedience, this didn't happen. But you'll see a lot of times in scripture, Yahuwah will say, you do this, you obey me, you will be above the nations. So this whole idea of equality in the world is not a biblical concept. Yahuwah gave a choice to his people. You obey me, you'll be above all the nations. You disobey me, I'm going to make the nations the head and you the tail. So as far as Yahuwah is concerned, there is no such thing as everyone's equal. There's no such thing of that in scripture. There's if anything, Yahuwah's word is anti-equality. Whether you talk about men versus women, women versus children, whether you talk about the nations versus Israel, Yahuwah always has a hierarchy. He always has someone above someone else. So, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this study. I hope all you brothers and sisters out there that are watching this study here got something out of it that was edifying. Please stay tuned, Yahuwah willing. We'll be back next Shabbat evening. And for all the new viewers out there, if you have watched through this whole recording here, you might as well like it, because obviously you liked it if you listened to me Babylon for 2 hours. You might as well like the video, subscribe, share. Please click on the notification bell if you want to see more of these types of studies and you want to be notified. It's a good way to get notified. All right. And again, for those of you that are having trouble finding any lives, you must go to our page and click the live tab. YouTube has a weird algorithm, guys. Our studies might not always appear on your timeline of videos or suggestions. So just in case, if you're not noticing any of our videos, you might want to go to the YouTube page and click on the live. So anyway, but have a great rest of your day. All of our brothers and sisters, have a great rest of your Shabbat. And Yahuwah willing, see you next time. Shabbat Shalom. Let me see here. Come on. Phone giving me trouble today.